You ready for the next thing?
Yeah, this is all you, baby.
What? Isn't that good timing? Because I can't get my the head. There we go. This is all me. We watched this special together. You didn't really care.
No, I didn't like do it. Like, what do you want to do? Like, did you just want to jump into it?
So Dave Chappelle's under a lot of like fire and criticism because he made a lot of like transphobic and homophobic jokes in his content.
Yeah, no,
and he always does it.
I didn't like find it particularly funny. I giggled at a couple of points, but like he is like a comedian, so he's a bit of an asshole.
That's right.
And you know, he like said some things against certain groups of people, and you know, it just at the very end, like it just wasn't that funny.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't find it like super funny either. I don't know. Maybe it was. I don't really know what it was. Some of it was like weird. There was just like a lot of jokes. I was like, okay, you know what, Bob? You know what? I'm surprised nobody's calling out against. He made a lot of weird, or a couple of weird Jewish jokes.
No, but like this is what I was telling you when we watched.
Well, hold on, really quick. Let me get the framing because every other joke, whether you liked it or not, had a setup. It had like a punchline. So I was like, okay, I just didn't find some of them funny. Not a big deal. But he would just like randomly go off on a tangent and then just blame the Jews. He like did this whole bit where he was talking about how cool it would be if there was a movie where people. Or like if aliens came and invaded Earth, but it turned out those aliens were people that used to live on Earth like 1,000 years ago or whatever, and they came back to resettle it and whatever, and then they're like, you know what, I'd call it space Jews, and it's like, why? It didn't even make sense.
No, but so that's what I'm saying to you. I think that if we go back and we watch older comedy specials, like a lot of like being a Jew is a punchline. Like that's it. Like I told you, like, oh, like I walked into a bar
Definitely
and there was a Jewish guy, and that would just be the beginning of the joke with like people cackling.
Yeah.
You know, like we talk about like all like the groups that like get shit, but it's not really recognized, and like Asian people is definitely one of them.
It's true.
But I think like Jews are still
he did make
like
kind
Jewish
of
people are still getting
shit on.
They're still like the butt of the joke for like existing.
Yeah, true.
You know?
Yeah. Well, he did have kind of a funny Asian joke though.
Yeah.
He was talking about how he got coronavirus, but it didn't actually impact, like he didn't feel sick. And then he talked about how there was like the Stop Asian Hate narrative and how he saw that it was mostly black people. And he was like, I don't mean to be insensitive, but that was basically like my body fighting off the coronavirus. It was so fucked up.
It was funny.
Yeah, it was kind of fucked up. But yeah, no, a lot of the jokes were just kind of like, I don't know. I wasn't a big, some of them like hit or miss. Wasn't a big fan. Some of them were weird. What's weird to me, and maybe I'm just being weird, but he made like a lot of like, jokes against white people, and I wasn't offended. I was just like bored, you know what I mean? And like, obviously those jokes aren't for me. That's fine. But one thing like stuck out to me because he made this joke about this white woman who followed him around. This old white woman.
Oh, yeah.
He built her up as this old white woman. He's like, oh, she's so old, blah, blah, blah. She followed him to his car and asked him if he hates women. And then he's like, well, in her defense, she probably was my age, but she looked really bad because, you know, black don't crack. And I was like, oh, if she, you do. My first thought was like, oh, she must have been like 65.
Yeah, no, and then we looked it up, and he's 48.
He's 48. So it's like one of those things where it's like, I get the black don't crack joke, but Dave Chappelle, this picture, he looks good in this. I think this is an older picture.
That's
a much older picture. He looks,
you know, he just like, it was a new special, and like he looks older.
He looks like he's 65.
I feel like he hasn't done content in a minute.
Yeah. He looked like 60. So I was like, oh shit, that joke didn't really land for me because you look like shit. But whatever. Anyway, so the heat that Dave Chappelle got was about the his jokes about the LGBTQ and trans community. And like, yeah, they were insensitive and they were, I guess, shitty. But first of all, they were jokes. Like, I mean, he's quite literally a comedian. I don't know what else to say. Second of all, I feel like people didn't really watch the special because the one thing that, to me, Dave Chappelle strikes me as a guy, because he defended, I think, J.K. Rowling and stuff. Dave Chappelle strikes me as a 60-year-old man. No, but he strikes me as an older guy who just doesn't get it, what it means to be trans. And he even kind of talked about it because he went into this big, and that's it. And I feel like we have a very interesting narrative that's like, you have to think trans women are women and trans men are men. I don't think you do. I do, but I don't think you have to. You just have to be respectful, right? Mm-hmm. Which means like validate those people's pronouns, call them their pronouns, their people, He talked to like one instance which was very humanizing where I'm actually going to get into the story, but you know, and if you don't feel comfortable using their pronouns, just call them by their fucking name, ask them what their name is. That matters more than anything else. And he talked about this anecdote, and I'm going to bring up this picture here. He did this whole this really hit me pretty hard. So this is a person named Daphne, and he went on this whole, he did like a 15-minute story about this where he met this is a trans woman, and he met this woman at a comedy club in San Francisco, I think. And she used to always go to his shows and watch them and laugh, even when he made like transphobic jokes. And one day he talked to her, and you know, he got her number, et cetera, et cetera. A while later, he came back to, I think it was San Francisco, and he wanted to do a show, but he needed an opener, so he had her open. And it was funny because apparently she only did like 8 shows before that, so the opening 45 minutes, she bombed the fuck out of the show, which I thought was really funny. And he made a point to mention that most people would have just walked out, like slunk out the back door.
Yeah, like out of like embarrassment.
Yeah, but you know, she stayed, and she sat in the front row, I think, and stayed for the rest of the show. And she started talking to Dave Chappelle while they were doing the bit, and he was talking about how it didn't bother him, but some of the audience members were getting bothered. But she was talking to him like the way he said, the way you talk to your TV when something's going on, you know. And at one point, he said that a guy got up or something and yelled, like, hey, like really loud, and it kind of just startled everybody, even Dave Chappelle. And he said something to the effect of, does the carpet match the drapes? And I think he was trying to be transphobic. And she said, no, I have hardwood flooring. And that's funny because she probably has a penis. Or even if she doesn't, you get the joke. So it was a funny joke, and apparently it like cut through the crowd. Everybody started laughing. Everybody loved her after that. They were having a really good interaction for the rest of the show. She came backstage with Dave Chappelle after, and she told like a bunch of other jokes. She was killing everybody, and he's like, you know, you have a lot of potential. You just bombed on stage. And it was really great. And what ended up happening is a while later, when his previous comedy show, or one of his previous shows, he was called out again for transphobic jokes, right? Because apparently that's like his thing. His thing really is just not getting LGBTQ people. But he used, outside of the few jokes, he used proper pronouns for everybody.
He is like, he's on the right, in my personal opinion, like he's on the right side of things, but just has like a realistic, ununderstanding view.
What do you mean?
Where like he makes I said he has a realistic, ununderstanding point of view, where like he even brought up like the bathroom bill, and like some like heckler in the audience like cheered, and he's like, no, this is a bad bill. And and it was a joke, like what he was saying, and the way that he explained it was like insensitive, but at the end of it, like he's in support of trans people. He's in support of,
he's just like, an old guy who, that's the thing, he's an old guy with a voice. And so one of the things that I think that we are very we don't understand here is the way that we talk about people is very backwards. So on the internet, somebody will ask you a question like, do you think trans women are women? And then you'll respond. That's not really a question that matters, because in real life, what matters is the interaction. It doesn't matter if you think trans women are women. If you call a trans woman a woman, even if you think that they're a man, you're being respectful. It doesn't matter. You're entitled to your own thoughts and perspectives as long as you're respectful. And most people, I think that's really Dave Chappelle's perspective. I don't know that he sees trans women as women, but he made a point to talk about. He made a point. He made a joke about her at the end of his bit, and it was the only time that she didn't laugh, and she got really upset. He made a joke about, like, he's like, I don't think I understand you, Daphne. And he made a joke about it. And she got dead silent, or she got, like, dead serious in where she was laughing the rest of the thing. And she said, you don't have to understand me. You just have to understand that I'm a person and I'm going through shit. And that was a very real moment. And I think it was real for him. It was definitely real for me. And he's like, it doesn't matter if you get me, but you should understand that I'm a person that's going through shit. And I think that was a really big aspect of it to me. That leaned very heavily on respect. And moving forward, what happened is after he got into a lot of trouble with, you know, transphobic shit on Twitter, she defended him on Twitter, and she said something to the effect of they talked a lot about punching down. That was a theme that he got very upset with, because he's punching down at gay people.
Yeah, no, it was like something happened, and Oh, he was talking about the girl, the trans girl from like wherever he lives at, and then like whatever happened with her, and then it got to a news article, like a LGBT news source that like used that language that he punches down on trans people.
Yeah, and he didn't like that.
And so like that was like the language that followed him in relation to like him and the LGBT community.
Yeah, and one of the things that he didn't like about the punching down narrative is he expressed a bit of a frustration was that like the LGBTQ community has moved much faster than or LGBTQ rights have moved much faster than like black rights, which is true. Although I will say one thing, he did like, I think in his response he leaned on that too much. He was like, "Oh, I was just expressing my frustration." It's like, yes, there was an expression of frustration that like the black rights movement hasn't moved as fast as the LGBTQ one, but most of it was just transphobic jabs, which were, some of them were funny, some of them weren't. But after she defended him and saying that like, hey, in order for you to punch down, you have to think less of people, and she doesn't, then Dave Chappelle doesn't think less of trans people, she got relentlessly bullied for a week by trans people to the point where she killed herself. And that was the moment that was like really fucked up, where it's incredible that, especially as a trans person, like you could be trans and somehow forget that trans people, like, people in general, but trans people, there's generally an association with being trans and having like mental struggles like anxiety and depression, and other trans people bullied a trans person into killing themselves. Yet there's not a single person who's ever taken their life because of Dave Chappelle. And it was a really like hard-hitting moment that like really fucked me up. I was like, wow. And it really fucked me up really bad. And as he went on, he talked about opening up a trust fund for Daphne's daughter, her daughter. And he was going to give it to her when she turns 21, and he wanted to be alive for it, which was phenomenal. And I think one of those things that people don't understand is that, like, maybe this is because I'm a man, I don't know, but like respect is probably the biggest thing that I worry about more than anything else. And I think that there's nothing more respectful that you could do than take care of somebody's kid when they pass away, because that's your legacy. That's quite literally your immortality, is your children. And so, like, at the end of the day, Dave Chappelle, to me, reads as a guy who's a little older, from an older generation, from a community that probably doesn't really get trans people. And he respects trans people. He just doesn't get it. And we've decided that that means he's the worst person in the entire world. And I think that people have a very, very ignorant understanding. And there's not a whole lot of press coming to Daphne from the people speaking out against Dave Chappelle. They've somehow overlooked that. There's people talking about her in defense of Dave Chappelle, but nobody's talking about her nobody's talking about her that's like anti-Chappelle. And so it bothered me. I thought it was really shitty. You know, and that really upset me yesterday. That shit fucked me out. That this woman,
it did. He was like messed up.
This woman like took her own life. Yeah, man, that shit was fucked up. This woman took her own life because she got bullied for defending somebody she didn't think was transphobic. So, yeah.
Rip Daphne.
Yeah, man, rip Daphne. Shit's fucked up. It's just not. I don't know. Yeah, nobody's a monolith. Yeah, not every trans person represents the experiences. I'm sure that as a comedian, she had a thicker skin. Like most comedians have thicker skin.
Yeah, most definitely.
And I understand being outraged by Dave Chappelle. I think it's fine that you don't like his content and that you're like, hey, I think it's transphobic. You shouldn't be saying that. That's totally fine. But to bully somebody that disagrees with you into killing themselves is fucking phenomenal. It's fucking phenomenal. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing.